Emily Stamets here. Today I'm talking through Judy's Magic Cast On and the unique spiral cast on for the Bicksborough blanket, which is its working title, which might change in the future. So what you've got is you need 2 sets of needles that are the same size. And you should have your circle, the center circle that you've already knit. I'm just using something that I have on the needles right now just for demonstration purposes, but this would be your center circle with your 45 stitches around the outside. And that is close by and it is still on needles ready to go. My working yarn is here, so this should be the first color of your spiral. Now I'm holding my 2 sets of needles, holding 1 needle from each side by side. They should be the same size if you can do that. Your longer one is going to be on the bottom. So this is the one that you're going to be using to actually knit the spiral. It should be on the bottom. I'm going to hold these together kind of like chopsticks with a small gap in between them. My working yarn is here. This is my tail end. And I'm going to bring that yarn up between the needles and wrap the tail end, just drop it off the back. Now you're going to need about 3 yards to do this whole cast on. I'm not going to cast on the full 117 stitches, so I'm just using a little bit, but you're going to want this point to be about 3 yards into your yarn. So my tail's off the back, my working yarn is coming towards the front in between those 2 needles. Now I'm going to take these 2 yarns and I'm just going to twist them. So I brought my tail to the front and my working yarn to the back. That just kind of locks that first loop in place. I'm holding my yarn in a what I call the alligator grip, which is your traditional grip for doing a long tail cast on. And now what we're going to do is we're going to hold those 2 needles together again. I'm going to show you from the top first. We are going to lift both needles together up and to the back of or over the top of that top yarn. And then we're going to bring that yarn over the top of that bottom needle or that front needle from the back. Okay, now I'm going to lift both needles up and I'm just going to bring them on top of that bottom yarn. Oops, it's hard to see. I'm looking at my camera instead of my hands. Okay, so I have my my grip like this. I'm bringing both needles up and I'm bringing them down over the top of that yarn like that. Both needles come up and over and behind that top yarn and bring it up from underneath. Then both needles come up and we just go whoop right over the top of that bottom yarn and then bring them under. Both needles go up and behind that top yarn, so the yarn comes down from the top. Both needles come up and right on top of that yarn, and then scoop it up from underneath. Both needles come up to the back, and that yarn goes down between. Both needles come up to the front, that yarn comes between from underneath. And we scoop them up and over. So let me do it a little bit more horizontally, which might be how you're looking at it when it's actually in your hands. I'm holding both needles here, and you come around behind that top yarn, and the yarn comes down from on top. We come up and we split the difference there and scoop from underneath. Both needles go up behind that top yarn, and the yarn comes down from the middle. Then we come to the front and the yarn scoops up from the middle and underneath. So at speed, what that looks like is we go up and around, we go down and under, up and around, down and under, up and around, down and under. Now what I recommend, I've got 2, 4, 6, I've got 10 stitches on 2, 4, 6, do 1 more on my bottom needle. I recommend placing markers every 10 stitches or so that way you don't have to try to count all 117 stitches at once. You're going to keep going until you have 234 stitches, 117 on the top, 117 on the bottom. Then we are going to flip this puppy right upside down. So you see my working yarn is still coming off to the left this way, and I'm just going to flip those because what we want for this blanket is we want that bumpy side of the cast on to be facing us. This is your right side of your cast on, which is backwards from normal, but it's okay. What this does is it helps to maintain the garter stitch pattern of the whole blanket. Okay, so you flipped it upside down like this. I'm gonna I have my tail, my working yarn is here, my tail is here. And I'm just gonna kind of like twist those around. There's no real right way or wrong way to do that. I just wanna kind of lock them together so that they don't come unraveled as I do these next couple steps. So what we're working with here is we're working with your top needle, which used to be your bottom needle. Okay, so this should be your longer one, but we're only going to be working with it for the foreseeable future. This bottom needle, all of those stitches can get put on hold. Now what I like to do is I like to use an interchangeable needle set, and then I can just pull that needle through, pull the needle off, add stoppers, and now I just leave the cable in there while I'm working. That way it's really easy to put it back on needles at the when you're ready to pick those stitches back up. All right, so I've got my working yarn, I have my tail here, I've got these kind of locked together like this. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick up your circle, make sure I have my working yarn in my hand here, and they're just twisted together. That's just to keep them from coming unraveled. There's no right or wrong way to do that, so however it works for you. So I picked up my working yarn. I only have one needle in the mix now. Okay, so that's my cast on stitches there. My bumps are facing forward. I'm gonna pick up my circle, which should already be on needles. And now we're gonna join these two together by just very simply starting to knit those first few stitches here. 1, 2, you're gonna do 9, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Bam. The rest of your stitches from your circle can go on hold. You can put them on waste yarn or keep them on a cable. But for the moment, you're only going to be working with those first 9 stitches of the circle and your 100 million cast on stitches over here. You're going to turn the work, make sure I'm using the right needles here, and you're going to knit 10. So I'm knitting across those 9 stitches of the circle. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I've got to my first stitch of my cast on, and I'm going to go ahead and grab that tail end again, and I'm just going to hold it back with my fingers to keep those stitches anchored again. Otherwise, when I start knitting, this thing is going to flop all over the place. It might get loose, and I just want it kind of out of my way. I'm just going to knit that first stitch. You're going to wrap and turn the next stitch, so slip, bring the yarn forward, pass it back, and turn the work. So now we've got 10 stitches here. We've got 1 wrapped stitch here. You've got your bumpy side facing forward, your circle to the left, you're on the right side. And you're just going to knit across and follow the instructions from there. Alrighty, I hope that was helpful. I do love this cast on as a provisional cast on because it becomes completely invisible once you've grafted it together at the end. And the texture of this and the tension of this is going to match the tension of your garter stitch around the whole blanket perfectly. And no one is going to be able to tell where you started the blanket. It's going to be like magic. Let me know if you have any questions. You can always email me at knit@emilystamets.com. Otherwise, happy knitting.